Hey everyone, welcome to episode 10,727 of SDRescue. I'm joined once again by Grayson Fulbright, and we are really excited to jump into today's email because it's actually really good. It's a technique that I think a lot of us want to use and have used in the past, but I think we'll be able to use more effectively. Grayson, how are you?
I'm doing well today. It's a good Monday, and I'm really excited to dive into this email because, like Austin said, I think testimonials, which is kind of one of the things we'll touch on today, they're really powerful in really whatever channel you use. When you're reaching out to a buyer, testimonials are really awesome social proof to kind of have that wow factor. And I think there's a lot of awesome advice we're going to be giving on this episode for how to use them. So Austin, do you want to go ahead and share the email?
Oh yeah, we'll jump right into the email.
Awesome. Cool. While he's getting that shared, for anyone listening, make sure to give us a thumbs up if you enjoy these weekly live sessions where we review and rewrite emails, and make sure also to subscribe if you enjoy our content. We definitely love it a lot.
Yeah, we love making these videos. Again, if you want to be on the show or if you want us to review your email, please send it to us. Connect with Grayson or I on LinkedIn. Follow the SDRev LinkedIn page or visit the SDRevolution.com website. And submit your email to us there. We'll be happy to take a look at it. And you can watch the feedback live. You can join us if you want. You don't have to, but we're always welcome to give suggestions where we can. So I've got the original pulled up here, and it says, "Hi Austin, we've helped marketing departments store their most important assets, effectively manage business critical information, and help save time and cost by sharing the right information to the right people at the right time for over 20 years in 100 countries with minimal IT intervention. Here are a couple of our customer testimonials. Marketing only spends a week managing the intranet. With the old system, it basically required a full-time IT resource. This company has been a great partner to work with. We wish all our partners were as good. Are you available for a quick 50-minute call later this week or next to hear more?" Okay, so we go down into the color code. We'll see that there's a ton of orange right up front, so leading with a lot of information about your company. And then incentive and value exchange, there is a touch of green, so save time and cost with minimal IT intervention. So what we're looking at here is saying, hey, we do this and it gets you X in the future state. Here's some incentive or some social proof rather that we are as good as we say we are, and we can make those claims. So it's a pretty standard email. It flows fine. It's short. So it has a lot of things going for it. It also has two, I think it was it two testimonials? Yeah, it has two different testimonials. One is about the customer problem, and the other is about just working with the vendor. So I think it's the fact that they have testimonials that aren't just saying the same thing, they address two different facets, I think is a positive that has going for it. I think that, I think as we'll see in the rework, there's a bit better way to deploy these. But overall, it's definitely a cut above your average like IT support company or it's a grade above spam is what I'm saying is I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you really nailed it on the head in terms of just kind of recapping what this email does. And I do agree it works. In fact, this style of email where you kind of front load in the intro your value prop is as quickly and as succinct as you can. I've used that in the past, not as first touch emails. I found the data showed that it wasn't the best thing to come out with as like the first or the second touch. But touches 3 through 5, this type of email can come in handy because the theory is, you're introing yourself, you're building some rapport, you're talking about the right topics. And sometimes it's good to just kind of go in and try to just like hit them and say, here, we do this, would it make sense to talk? And so there's definitely, I think, value in taking a strategy like this. I think another thing to praise about this email is while they do have two separate testimonials that kind of cover two different topics in two different areas, I think overall this email is pretty well focused. They have a clear value prop, and then they shift to adding value with some testimonials, and they ask for time. They don't get too involved. In the last episode last week, we had an email that was similar to this, but very long, very heavy. And I think this is a good example of, if you're going to lead with a value prop, if you're going to lead with talking about your brand, do something similar to this, where you lead with it, be straightforward, and just try to be as succinct as possible. I think the only real big feedback here is like, using testimonials it's great, but it's also great to have a reason behind using the testimonial, either by just like full frontal being like, I'm here to send you a testimonial and make that the focus of your email, or use the testimonial to support an argument in your email. I think that's really the only thing I see missing here. But overall, it's short, it's succinct, and it seems pretty focused to me.
Yeah, so I did like that. And like you said, if you're going to, it's not an email I would send. I loved personalization. I love to go in a little bit more tailored, but you're right, from a standpoint of, hey, if you're a salesperson or an SDR in a culture where it's fire and forget, like where, it's there are some, it depends on the organization you're a part of, right? Who's steering the ship most of the time. Most of us don't get to call our own shots. Sometimes we do, we get that autonomy, but a lot of times we're, especially as an SDR, you're told what to send, how much to send, where to send it, and given and not given as much autonomy as maybe we'd like. So if you're in that boat, there's a couple of things and you have to lead with, hey, here's our company, here's what we do. I think this was one of the best that we've read on the show, and probably that I've read in recent time, of being concise and to the point about what you do. I thought it was really well written. That one paragraph, I don't know that you could strip anything out of that a little bit more, and take the same approach. And then my thought was with the testimonials, the first one that talks about the different problems, I would have liked to see the one bit that I would change if I was still going to take this approach is add in, like your color coding saw, there wasn't a lot of green. There was just that one little touch. And if they could have made that 30% to 40% more green, which is future state for people, I stopped the share. So for people who aren't seeing, that's the future state. I would have liked to see that future state tie in more with the testimonial, because then you're leading with the problem and current state, tease the future state, and then you get validation on your future state. That's what I was thinking there, is if there's just a touch more green and with that orange would have been really good to see.
Yeah. To kind of go into the future state here in the email, that was going to be my second major piece of feedback. But I think, out of everything that they did, overall structure is great. I think that this is a pretty well made email.
I read this email, by the way. When I read through it, because normally I don't. I'll go back and have to re-review them when we put them on the show for sure. But this was one I read, and I think that speaks to when my eyes saw it. Remember, it's interesting to me how much sales is turning in, just because it's so connected now with technologies, that the user experience of your email is really important. So subject line, is it good? Does the first line of your email you have to write for the preview, and then when you open it, and then you write to the open. Okay, now they've opened it. What's their reaction? And right. And so just so everyone knows, I actually read this email, which I didn't reply to it, but I did read it, which I think goes to show it was decently formatted, and it was concise and clear in its ideas.
Yeah, and that's important context, because that's the first step in the battle for cold email. To kind of go back into what I was saying, I think my second major piece of feedback for the email here is working better on the future state. I'm going to kind of touch on what you said and say, yes, when you're trying to either bring pains or some sort of ideal future vision to the buyer, you want to kind of wrap it into the email. I think what these guys really didn't do well is they kind of just put it in there. They even had an entire line with minimal IT intervention. It's almost lazy. Instead of finding a way to interweave that into the copy so it's easy for them to read, they had to make a second line or an extra line there to describe themselves. And then I think a second piece to that is, when you're describing future states, it's A, very important to describe it in a way that people can relate to, and B, it's important to describe it in a way that sounds specific enough to be believable. I think the save time and costs pitch and benefit is of course, well overused. That's like the foundation of sales back in the old age is we save you time, costs, or we improve efficiency. And I think if you're going to bring a future state and you're going to lead the email by pitching with a value prop, you got to be more specific. Save what, like save how much time for who, save costs where. And then if you're talking about minimal IT intervention, I actually got kind of confused by that little line there when they do the little value prop and then they say with minimal IT intervention. I'm not really an expert in their space. So the first thing I thought was like, wait a minute, you help marketing departments do all this stuff with their IT and tech with minimal intervention, like you don't touch it. And so I think being more specific on what exactly you're presenting as a future status, it would really help this email a lot. Because while I think the reason why you read it was because it was well formatted, well structured, so the user experience made you feel like, okay, this is worth reading, I think the little nuances of what would actually get you to respond were missing. And I think it starts with that green area of like, what is the actual future you're presenting to Austin? Right now, it's save time and costs, which every company claims to be able to do with minimal IT intervention, which is kind of up to interpretation.
Yeah, I think if I saved as much money and cost as was promised in sales emails, I'd be retired by now. Right? Like It's just
your
like every time I get pitched, I'm gonna save more money. I'm like, dude, at this point, my business should be running on like 99.99% margins. Like, I would just start buying everything. But yeah, 100%. And we're gonna jump back into the share here and look into this a little more. So the just to recap, so here's where we can kind of look back and just see really quick what we discussed, because it was up before and now it's back up. So there's save time and cost is the green, minimal IT intervention. It's just not enough. Like, I wish there would be more of this. See, marketing only spends minutes a week managing the intranet. With the old system, it basically required a full-time IT resource. So, they're talking about how they had to have like an IT person manage the marketing team's resources, like all their creative assets. And I think they mentioned that assets and critical information. So they're talking about like their database, where they're pulling their marketing analytics. So, if you have a modern marketing stack, it's pretty complicated, or it can be, between getting stuff from your marketing automation and in and out of your CRM, and then moving that into like different sales engagement platforms. I mean, there's a lot of things plugged in that marketing touches now. So I would have loved to hear a little bit more about that problem. Even if it wasn't future state, even if it was more current state, like, hey, do you spend a lot of time managing your creative assets? Because guess what? If you're working in 4K video like I do, dude, it's a hassle. I have like a $1,500 NAS just to like back up videos to, and this is just like my home for my hobby. Like, if you're a business, and you either got to pay more for Adobe Creative Cloud or buy some cloud storage, and then that's backlogged because you have to download your files locally. It's a headache. It's awful. Nobody in marketing loves the question, okay, so we were making all this content, where do we put it, right? Nobody likes that question, and I would have loved to hear more of that in this email. It's really painful. I'm allergic to talking about where to house my creative assets. I have a visceral reaction.
I wanted to make one point on what you just said before we move over to the rewrite, that, for whoever's listening, Austin just buyer planed out loud exactly what I think this person should have been thinking about when they write the email. And instead of being vague, talking about time and costs, like, listen to what Austin was talking about. There are specific software, specific use cases, specific situations that, especially if you're targeting people well, certain types of marketers should be dealing with. And I think that is where those future states should be in. It shouldn't be general, which means like I could take this email, strip out the state that I just promised this one prospect and throw it at another. Like, no, it should be really, really closely aligned to your buyer situation. And I like, Austin, I just love that little spiel there, because I feel like you help people who are selling understand what the buyer is actually thinking about.
Yeah, and it's really hard, like, especially if you are an SDR, you're coming out of school, or this is your first, even second SDR job, and you change industries. Like, the biggest part of the learning curve, I think, in the sales development, or even the AE that's running a full cycle, right, that isn't fed on set meetings for them yet. and really in general, the biggest initial learning curve that I find that reps have is understanding not only what they're told the value proposition is, but like what the actual value proposition is in the day-to-day or in the experience of somebody's life. And it's not that they don't have empathy for the prospect, it's that they just don't understand at a very, very granular level. That's why a lot of sellers that are successful in industries that they, for example, one of our most successful sales reps was an IT director formerly. And so he has a lot of empathy and a lot of firsthand experience onto how to translate the value proposition into something meaningful for the buyer that converts, right? Because he understands the pain very granularly. All right, let's look into this beautiful rewrite. Oh, so many colors. Taste the rainbow today. Okay. Let's see, would you like me to read this? I feel like I've been talking a lot, or would you like to take it away?
I can take it away if you'd like.
Beautiful. Have at it.
All right. Hi, Austin. Is marketing responsible for their own IT and software infrastructure? Marketing teams are often overwhelmed with technology, massive databases, complicated automation workflows, and business-critical software that demands regular upkeep. Without dedicated IT support, even minor tech problems can block productivity, create confusion, and force marketing departments to focus on internal fires rather than generating revenue. As our customer person number one puts it, marketing only spends minutes a week managing the internet. With the old system, it basically required a full-time IT resource. I'm hoping to connect about the IT landscape at Company and share a few tips that have helped hundreds of marketing teams streamline technology management. Would you be open to connect via email? I'm also happy to give you a call if you're available.
Awesome.
What do you think, Austin?
So immediately, yes. So you mentioned databases, automation workflows, software. You're speaking my language, right? And this is a big thing that I think that people miss when, you don't need to have a huge resume or a massive set of experience for people to believe that you're credible. I think that's like how people look at experts that have really nice resumes and long career pedigree and think, wow, I can't use credibility until I've got 10 years of experience and a PhD from Harvard or something, right? Like the credibility comes into what are you saying that leads me to believe that you actually understand me and my problem. And so immediately this email is much more clear. Starting with the purple and the gold, the Lakers colors for all of our Boston friends out there. The reason that works, you can talk a little bit why it works. I think that you make it a narrative. So the storytelling, the purple, if you can tell me a story, and that story is how I'm living my life, I believe it because I live the story. And if you're telling me a story that I didn't tell you first, that means you understand. Human beings are very narrative driven. That's how our brains work. And so I really like how this begins in a narrative format where, again, and you're not making any assumptions, you're not pointing any fingers at the buyer. It's marketing teams, right? But you're emailing someone on a marketing team. And so you allow them to put themselves in the story. And if your story lines up, it doesn't have to be a perfect, it doesn't have to be one-to-one what's going on, right? I think people get also, when they get talking about email customization and storytelling, they're like, oh, I got to tell the exact story that's happening and I can't get enough information. You'll never get enough information. But if you can tell a story where it's like, oh yeah, that sounds pretty much like me, got my credibility. You have my attention. Now I'm going to read the rest of your email.
Yeah. I think you nailed it on the head. What it comes down to for me is having buyers self-identify. I think you're absolutely right. That's kind of how I approach email when I format it in these ways. I'm trying to explain a narrative that if I sent it to someone who wasn't in my market, it would be totally worthless, irrelevant, not even make sense. But to these specific people, this is supposed to be a story that does exactly what you said. It makes them identify with it, makes them relate with whatever might be there. And that's another thing too, is it's not always going to be the whole message. I get a lot of people that respond because I talk about a problem and they might say, oh, like, hey, Grayson, I just wanted to respond because, I'm not interested right now, but I was really curious the way that you kind of explained this. I'll make sure to check out some more of your blogs or something. I get tons of responses like that. And I think a lot of SDRs and a lot of sales teams have the opportunity to get those types of responses, which we talked about this in past episodes. Responses and engagement is good with the right people. Even if it's not immediately productive, even if it doesn't immediately lead to a sales opportunity, if they're the right buyers, then let them respond, get them to respond. And that's why I format it in this way, where I'm telling a story that's trying to get them to relate to a series of pains that I think paints their world. And then we kind of get into the kicker, where I start talking more about myself and the incentives that I can kind of bring to them.
Yeah, so SDRs out there that are maybe at a startup and are thinking, hey, my territory is so huge, I don't know that it matters. Because Grayson made this point in a previous episode where, and it's a really good doctrine to take to heart, that any good engagement, even if it doesn't turn to a meeting right now, is good engagement. And so that means don't send spam stuff. Don't break the rules just because you feel like this lead in the record is expendable. Because guess what? Territories only get smaller. As somebody that joined a company as like employee number 18 or 22, I can't even remember anymore. It's been so long. But as an SDR, as we grew and eventually got acquired, guess what? My territory only got smaller. So I think, and territories are only getting smaller. People want to be more account-based. And especially if you're in account-based infrastructure right now, you really don't want to be burning bridges. You really want to be telling good stories and having good interactions. So I think that's good. And then as you go from that story, you reinforce it. So now you've got this person who's self-identified. They've said yes, or maybe they've said no, right? Maybe they said, that doesn't sound like me. And then they read, either way, this is going to cement their decision, right? Hey, I'm resonating with the story. Boom, as our customer number one puts it, here's the quote. They're like, oh yeah, yep, I'm always contacting IT, or we have an IT specialist that just handles marketing stuff and they complain about it all the time. Or, you know what I mean? Like you go right into that and it acts as a mental anchor to the story that you've just pushed. If they resonate with it, great. If they don't resonate with the story, it also goes, oh yeah, I don't think this sounds like me. But either way, it should prompt a response.
Yeah, well, I think the testimonial there is me trying to show the viewers that testimonials can be used in creative ways. I've seen emails out there where that's the email. Hey, I wanted to reach out and send over a testimonial from one of our customers. Okay, that works. It's good. But there are ways that you can use testimonials from customers to tell the stories in your email. And I think that's really what like good testimonials will allow you to do that. When I read that original email, I love this testimonial because that was the inspiration for my email. I read marketing only spends minutes a week managing the intranet, and I was like, dang, like that's not a lot. And then I kept reading and I was like, I see. Okay, so basically, like they just described that although the old system was a full-time IT resource, they spent minutes a week. And I think that like comparison of like full-time 40 hours a week versus minutes a week, that just resonated so great with me. And so what I did is I took that, my favorite part of the email, and I just used it for my story. And so kind of going back to your point, whether someone agrees with this or not, whether it resonates with them or not, the testimonial is there to A, support my argument. Yep. And B, at the same time, it builds credibility. Because even if you don't agree, even if you're not, if this use case doesn't align with you, it's still my customer, and you still read it, and you know that I have a customer, and that is a couple steps further than I've heard of this brand before. If a buyer knows that you're a brand that has a customer in their space that has given you a testimonial, that's clout. Multiple layers of cloud.
Yep.
And so that's why I put it in the email, but I tried to use it creatively and not just kind of paste it, try to use it to tell the story.
No, that's good. And I think, and I really think it works. And I think there are sales reps out there. So when I first moved from an SDR to being an AE, our sales manager required us to follow up every DocuSign with this testimonial template where it was like, if once you send a DocuSign, so when the contract's out and they haven't opened it, or they opened it and haven't signed it, if there's like a period of time in between that, this was back before like a lot of sequence technology was rolled out. I know this is going to be hard. People are going to be like, I have an outreach sequence that does that for me. But like we would look, and if it was like a day or two or something where they hadn't done anything with it, or there were those requirements, we were required to send an email, a copy and pasted email. I mean, we could have tailored it, but we all copied and pasted it with testimonials like, hey, just wanted to send over these testimonials of our happy customers. Bloop. And I mean, I don't think it really helped move the needle along because it wasn't tailored. It wasn't used contextually in a way that was productive. And this is a really good template to follow people watching, that, hey, find testimonials and find ways to contextually insert them into your buyer's journey, because that's where they become really helpful. I know that it seems like something that's so, I think testimonials are one of those things that have been beaten to death in the wrong way so many times that if you just get a little bit creative, you're going to have, it's almost like a pattern interruption, right? If I get an email that said, hey, Austin, here's an email from another director of sales at a company just like yours, pretty small sales team in the technology space, and they were having very similar problems with rep activity or something like that, right? I thought you'd find it useful, and it was, and it was that, and it promised. I knew I'd watch it, and it would resonate with me as a buyer. So,
yeah.
Talk about your CTA a little bit.
Oh, yeah. So let me go into that a little bit. I just wanted to show a little example of kind of how to do CTAs differently. I try each episode, if I can, to kind of adjust it from the last one just to show some different examples. And I think this is a good way. I call this a split CTA, where it's good to focus on one ask, but it can be advantageous and it can kind of push people over the fence if you give them what I call basically like a split ask, where you say, hey, option 1 ? Or alternatively option 2. And so the way that I kind of like framed this is the easiest one first. Would you be open to connect via email? Because I know that is much easier than them taking a call. The mental energy of them accepting a call from a salesperson, I know, is a lot. But that doesn't mean that I wouldn't accept a call, which means for those buyers that read all the way down, totally agree with my message and are ready to chat, that's where I'm saying, I would be happy to call you, and I would be totally okay to get this conversation started. It doesn't always work, and it's not a good idea to have too many asks in a CTA, but if you can split it and kind of make it polar between a very easy ask and maybe an ask for someone who's more in market, I've generated a lot of positive responses and a lot of sales opportunities just from having that sort of messaging throughout the whole sales process, not just cold outreach. I think I want to make that point clear as well. Like, when you're selling, it's always good to have control over kind of what's going on and the progression throughout the buying process, and having split decisions like that can help give you more control. Because then the buyer is not, if the buyer doesn't agree with that first decision, they're not just going to say no and the deal stalls. It gives some leeway for at least conversation, I would say.
I agree. And I think what people don't understand is they're not trying to close a deal. You're trying to close a series of small decisions that ultimately culminate in a closed one deal, right? I mean, the always be closing methodology and saying is long gone, but I think it still has a place in that you have to always be closing on the prospect moving to a next step. And hopefully you're selling them and properly guiding them to more yeses. I think in gap selling, Keenan talks about this pretty well, is where he talks about how you just want to get them to move up a step. Like, it's going to take effort, and normally your effort increases exponentially as it gets closer to the end of the sales cycle to move them up. Like getting them to get a meeting. Okay, yeah, they have a meeting, but to getting them to like contract, that takes a little more effort. But I really like the split CTA here, just because it is. I think it's really awesome because someone could just go, I don't want to call, I'll send them an email, Or it also gives them the chance of like, okay, yeah, I'll say, yeah, let's talk. You give them the chance to schedule the meeting with you and hop on a call. If they're like, oh yeah, this actually really sucks for me right now, I want to fix it. So I think the CTA is awesome. I think we're just about, we got 1 minute. So I think that'll be a good place to wrap up. Because I really like the way this email is rewritten. But just a reminder for everybody, we do this every Monday, 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. Follow the SD Revolution LinkedIn page. Go to the website's sdrevolution.com. Is that right, Grayson?
Yep. SDRevolution.com.
Not good at spelling things, but I'll take your word for it. And we will happily see you here next week.
Yep. See everybody next week. As Austin said earlier, if you have emails, if you know people who want their emails reviewed or would like to check out this episode, connect with us, Austin or myself on LinkedIn, and let's chat. You can join us for a show, or you can just send your email and join us live to watch us review it.
Yeah, you can also hop in the Slack channel.
Yes.
We're
Definitely
on there.
come into SDRev's community Slack group. We'd be happy to just like review your emails just one-on-one, to be honest.
I will gladly chop it up in the Slack if somebody hits me up in my Slack DMs.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks everybody. I will see you next week.
Yep. See you next week, everybody.